November 16, 2025. At 8:12 a.m., the world's most advanced U.S. aircraft carrier detected an unidentified vessel speeding near Venezuelan waters. Minutes later, FA-18 fighters launched. By 8:31 a.m., the boat was gone, and there were no survivors. The U.S. said the vessel posed a narcotics threat. Venezuela issued furious denials, and satellite evidence complicated everything. What really drove America's deadliest decision at sea? The answers start now. At 8:12 Coordinated Universal Time, the Combat Information Center aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford registered a sharp, high-speed radar return, a detection of an unidentified vessel running dark with its AIS transponder off and closing fast on the carrier group's perimeter. The bridge team snapped to alert, their voices clipped and direct as they relayed the contact through encrypted communications. Within seconds, the operations officer flagged the threat to Rear Admiral Paul Lanzalota, who weighed the situation against a backdrop of escalating narco-boat encounters in the region. The Ford's protocol demanded precision and speed. Air Wing commanders huddled over their consoles, confirming the unidentified boat's trajectory and speed with a second radar sweep. The deck crew moved into action, prepping two FA-18 Super Hornets for immediate launch. On the flight deck, handlers in cranial helmets and colored jerseys coordinated by hand signals, guiding the fighters into position. The catapult crew ran their checks, steam hissing underfoot as the launch officer received the green light from the Combat Information Center. Authorization came at 8:15 Coordinated Universal Time. Rear Admiral Lanzalota's order moved down the chain, activating a well-rehearsed scramble. The air boss's voice cut through the radio chatter. Launch both. Within minutes, the Super Hornets roared down the catapult, engines at full afterburner, rising into the humid Caribbean morning. Inside the Combat Information Center, radar operators tracked both the fighters and the approaching vessel, updating course and speed on digital charts. Every decision from detection to launch was logged by the minute. The window for action was measured in seconds. On the deck and in the Combat Information Center, the pressure was unmistakable. One misstep could put the entire carrier group at risk. At 0831 UTC, the decision left the flight lead's hands and became a matter of seconds. The Super Hornet's targeting system locked onto the fast-approaching vessel, its radar and infrared sensors confirming the boat's position just outside Venezuela's territorial limit. The command came through, weapons free. A single missile streaked from the fighter's wing, closing the distance in a flash. The strike hit amidships, breaking the vessel apart and sending debris in a plume of smoke rising over the sea. No return fire was detected from the boat in the final moments. On the carrier, the Bridge and Combat Information Center logged the event with precise timestamps. The deck crew braced for any sign of escalation, but the radar screen showed only the scattered remains of the target. Within minutes, the air boss authorized a rotary wing search and rescue launch. A Seahawk helicopter lifted off, its crew scanning the water with FLIR, forward-looking infrared systems, for any sign of survivors or floating wreckage. The search pattern swept the area for 10 minutes, circling the coordinates of the strike. Search operations found no survivors. Reports from the helicopter and deck logs confirmed what the pilots had already seen. No survivors and only minimal debris visible on the surface. The crew relayed these findings back to the carrier, where the operations team compiled the after-action statement and flagged the engagement for immediate review. The search ended as quickly as it began, leaving unanswered questions about the boat's crew and the evidence used to justify the strike. The operational sequence was over, but the debate about what happened and why was just beginning. Commercial satellite firms moved quickly to analyze the strike zone. Maxar and Planet Labs released high-resolution imagery, each stamped with metadata that confirmed a pass over the Caribbean at 0831 UTC. The coordinates matched the US Navy's timeline, placing the destroyed vessel about 35 nautical miles from Venezuela's coast, outside the 12-mile territorial limit. Independent analysts scrutinized the pixel hashes and acquisition logs, confirming the images had not been altered after capture. Still, minor timestamp offsets of less than 2 minutes surfaced when comparing US military releases to the raw commercial data. These discrepancies raised questions about the event's exact sequence, but not its location. Attention turned to the Automatic Identification System, AIS. The suspect boat's transponder remained silent throughout the encounter, leaving a gap in the public vessel registry. Open source intelligence intelligence researchers noted that this absence is common among smuggling craft, but it also complicated efforts to verify the boat's identity or intent. Marine traffic logs for the engagement area showed a blank window, with no civilian or commercial vessels reporting positions within a 10-mile radius at the time of the strike. Environmental conditions added another layer of uncertainty. Satellite passes earlier that morning had been hampered by scattered cloud cover and rough seas. Nighttime imaging, while technically possible, suffered from limited resolution, leaving small debris fields difficult to confirm. Independent analysts, drawing from open source tools and NOAA data, acknowledged these constraints while urging caution and drawing firm conclusions from partial evidence. The chain of documentation, satellite imagery, AIS logs, and environmental data formed the backbone of the public record, yet each source carried its own blind spots, leaving the full story of the strike open to interpretation and debate. Tren de Aragua began as a prison gang inside Tocaron Penitentiary in Venezuela's Aragua state, but over the last decade it has transformed into one of Latin America's most elusive and dangerous criminal syndicates. The group's leadership operates as a shadowy network, rarely named in public, directing operations that stretch from extortion rackets on land to high-speed drug runs at sea. Their maritime tactics rely on so-called go-fast boats, long, narrow craft with multiple outboard engines, stripped of identifying marks and rigged for maximum speed. These vessels are launched from clandestine docks along Venezuela's northern coast, often at night, and run with lights off and AIS transponders disabled to avoid detection. U.S. counter-narcotics doctrine treats any unidentified fast-moving vessel from this region as a potential threat, especially when it approaches a carrier group during a surge in interdiction patrols. Intelligence reports have linked Tren de Aragua's maritime wing to a spike in narcotics trafficking toward the Caribbean, fueling a posture among U.S. commanders that prioritizes aggressive interdiction and rapid escalation if a boat fails to comply or runs dark near critical assets. The group's ability to move quickly and blend into civilian traffic complicates positive identification, but the risk calculus for U.S. forces is shaped by the gang's reputation for violence and its history of evading law enforcement at sea. The aftermath of the strike drew immediate scrutiny from legal scholars and humanitarian organizations. Maritime law, as codified in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, permits interdiction of suspicious vessels in international waters, yet the threshold for using lethal force remains unsettled. The engagement took place roughly 35 nautical miles from Venezuela's coast, outside the recognized 12-mile territorial limit, a fact confirmed by both U.S. Navy statements and independent satellite analysis. Still, the absence of positive identification and the lack of return fire complicated the legal picture. Rules of engagement for U.S. carrier groups allow for preemptive action if a vessel is deemed a credible threat, but require the on-scene commander's explicit authorization. Here, Rear Admiral Lanzalota signed off after a rapid threat assessment. Humanitarian advocates, including regional non-governmental organizations, questioned whether all possible steps were taken to verify the boat's intent or to attempt non-lethal interdiction. They highlighted the short search and rescue window and the absence of survivors as grounds for a full, transparent inquiry. The debate quickly moved beyond military protocol, raising hard questions about the balance between operational necessity, legal standards, and the obligation to preserve life at sea. Venezuela's foreign ministry registered a formal protest within hours of the strike, denouncing what it called a criminal act of aggression and demanding an immediate response from the Organization of American States. President Maduro's government insisted the destroyed vessel was a civilian craft and accused the United States of violating both international law and Venezuelan sovereignty. State media launched a coordinated campaign, broadcasting interviews with officials who described the incident as an extrajudicial killing and called for regional solidarity against United States imperial overreach. The Organization of American States Permanent Council convened an emergency session in Washington, drawing heated debate from across the hemisphere. Delegates from Mexico, Argentina, and several Caribbean nations pressed for an independent investigation, while Colombia and Brazil defended the United States' action as a necessary step against organized crime. The resulting communique stopped short of outright condemnation, instead urging transparency, restraint, and a rapid fact-finding mission. Venezuela dismissed the statement as inadequate inadequate and threatened to reconsider its participation in regional forums. Policy experts and human rights advocates seized on the moment, calling for the release of unredacted operational logs and full disclosure of the engagement's evidence chain. The diplomatic split laid bare the region's deep divisions, with some governments warning that unchecked escalation could destabilize hemispheric security for years to come. Today, one miscalculation in contested waters can trigger global ripples. As tensions between the United States and Venezuela escalate, the line between law enforcement and open conflict blurs. In this new era, a single decision at sea could redraw the map of hemispheric security. What would you risk for control?